Right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our weekly webinar. The clock has struck noon here in our Cape Town studio, and we're thrilled to have you join us today for today's live investment event and our webinar brought to you by Real Estate Investor. I'm Neil Peterson. I'm the founder and content-in-chief of REI, South Africa's leading independent platform for real estate content, education, and news since 2007. And I'm really excited to be your host and moderator for today's webinar for what promises always to be a valuable session. And at REI, we're dedicated to supporting you, the South African real estate investor, the real estate service industry, the property business community through our digital platform, rei.co.za, our monthly digital magazine, Real Estate Investor Mag, and our investment webinars, seminars, and live investor events. And today we hope to elevate that experience. So before I introduce you to our specialist guest panelists and dive into today's topic, which is the construction mafia in South Africa, first, some housekeeping. We get this question a lot. If you've registered for today's webinar, we'll send you a recording via email after the event. For those who haven't registered, you can find the recording on the homepage of the rei.co.za website under events and webinars section in the replay section. We encourage you all to engage directly and actively, and you can ask questions throughout the webinar. So please submit your questions in the Q&A box, not the general chat box located at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. And so without further ado, let's jump into our theme for today's webinar. So this one is quite a controversial one, but it's one which is definitely affecting our economy and property industry, and it is all about the construction mafia in South Africa. What are the risks? What are the implications for property developers, investors, and security? So the construction sector in South Africa is definitely facing a critical challenge, and it threatens the safety of its stakeholders and also the stability of its investments. And despite loud promises to address the issues, extortion groups, often referred to as the construction mafia, continue to pose a serious risk to developers, investors, and the workforce across the country. And we've heard that from newly appointed Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure, Dean McPherson. He's been actively engaging with infrastructure investors to forge partnerships aiming to turn South Africa into one giant construction site. So while these efforts sound encouraging, industry leaders warn that the reality still remains daunting. And if we look at the construction industry, it's a cornerstone of the South African economy, employing almost 1.2 million people and contributing almost 110 billion to the GDP as of Q4 2023, according to Stats South Africa. So investment in this sector promises not only enhanced infrastructure, but also critical job creation across the entire construction value chain. However, if we leave this unchecked, the threats from these criminal groups, and we will discuss that, whether they are criminal, where it's coming from, they could undermine this essential sector, affecting job security, project timelines, and most importantly, investor confidence. So we welcome you to participate in our discussion today as we explore the risks, implications, and strategies needed to protect one of South Africa's most vital industries with our three guest panelists today. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our distinguished panelists. We're going to start off with Sia Mbanjwa. He's the CEO of Pace Property Group. Welcome to you, Sia. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience today?
Hi, good afternoon, Neil. Good afternoon, fellow panelists, and most importantly, good afternoon to everyone else that has logged in. As indicated, it's Sia Bonga in full, Banjwa. I represent Pace Property Group. We're a group of companies that includes Pace Project Management, amongst others. So we're quite involved in terms of managing construction projects on behalf of clients as principal agents as well as development managers. We also are providing other property services in the sector, and our investors in our own rights. So yeah, that's us. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Great having you here on the show today, Sia. And so, yeah, we'll look forward to the discussion. Our next guest is Mike Voertman. He's the CEO of Verify Group. So welcome to you, Mike. You want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Hi there. Thank you very much. We are a security provider, national across SA, with some tentacles into Europe as well, focusing primarily on remote monitoring and managed services related to helping our clients keep control to what's going on their properties. There's an intelligence layer built into what we do. We use AI extensively, and our exposure is, primarily within the property sector. We do have construction clients as well, and so we've got quite a broad exposure in the market. So we face the same challenges that everybody else does, with the criminals getting more and more creative every day. So that's us in a nutshell.
Well, okay, welcome to you, Mike, and we look forward to unpacking that and seeing, what the issues are and obviously how we can deal with them. Last but not least, we've got Dylan Walls. He's the Chief Operating Officer of Bidprop. So welcome to you, Dylan. Do you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, thanks, Neil. So Bidprop does so we finance and develop backyard rental flats on township properties. So we'll partner with a property owner who has a house. They've got space behind the house that they would like to develop. We partner with local construction companies from within the townships we work in, build, say, 4 or 6 bachelor flats, and then we partner with the property owner for 10 years after that, to help them run the property and share in the rental income.
Excellent. Wonderful. Great initiative, Dylan. And so welcome to you, and we look forward to your input on this discussion as well. So let's start. So Sia, let's maybe start with you, and let's define what construction mafia is. Who are these groups, and where do these illicit networks originate? What are the roots of these groups? Can you maybe just share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so look, I would love to meet the guy that actually came up, or the lady that actually came up with the term construction mafia, because it's quite telling. I think we all know the construction industry. Of course, this is the industry that's affected. So the construction part of that makes a lot of sense. The mafia part, of course, originates from the Italian-American sort of gangs, organized crime and things like that. And if you look at what has happened in the construction industry, the worst part of what has happened in this industry, you can pretty much call it the mafia. So the term is very much relevant. But I do like to differentiate, between the construction mafia, let's say, and legitimate business forums, which is basically groups that organize themselves from a particular group. They believe that if they come together, then it will be a lot easier for them to go and negotiate with any contractors or investors that come into their area. Those are legitimate, and provided that they stick to the rules, there's nothing wrong with that. And then, you get ordinary community groups that organize themselves as well. They're looking for employment opportunities. They're looking for subcontracting opportunities. So I'd like to sort of differentiate between all of those groups. The main difference with the construction mafia is that they pretty much come in guns on their backs, demanding minimum of 30% of the contract value, and not really much work being offered. If you don't do that, then there are definite consequences. So basically, you're now talking about crime. So it's clear there's a negative connotation to this, and they are criminals at the end of the day. and it's important to differentiate. So that's how I like to sort of differentiate between these groups. Where do they come from? The root cause. Look, I guess it's a complex one because we live in one of the most unequal societies in the world, right? You have communities that are sitting with very high unemployment rates. You have poverty that is affecting communities, etc. So if they see a massive project taking place in their area, the first thing that they would want to do is what is it? What is in it for us? And is there something that we can gain out of this? That's a legitimate expectation. And provided that the necessary consultations take place beforehand and discussions take place, there's nothing wrong. In fact, our legislation allows a minimum of 30% of any contract value that's above 30 million rand, that local communities can participate in employment as subcontractors, as suppliers, and so forth. But I think the negative side of this in terms of the root cause, I've indicated our social challenges as a country, that's part of it. But the other side of it is the criminal element. Back in the days, what used to happen is that every fortnight contractors pay their workers. And, if it's casual labor, for example, a lot of the guys used to get these little envelopes and they used to write on the outside how much each person is getting. Then the main guy that's going to pay them would drive in their bakkie at about 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock. The contractor is going to leave site or he's going to pay his workers, and then everyone disperses because they finish early. So he'd have a lot of money with him. And what used to happen is that the guys would simply hang around and wait until this happens. That's really the history. That's where now a lot of the time there were no consequences to this. And slowly but surely, it got to a point where they would start using legislation such as the 30% local community involvement rule to take advantage of these sites. We saw a lot of this happening in the KZN, Durban sort of area. There were these guys called Amadela Ngokubona, which is a business forum. They were probably the most prominent guys that were doing this around the country. I think the most dangerous aspect of it was that some of them have some sort of backing and people that were justifying and saying this is the right thing. But it's wrong because, you don't go and just demand without you doing any work. And if something doesn't happen, you basically take out a gun and stop construction. So that's really the background.
Great. Now, thank you very much for setting the scene there, Sia. Essentially, it's a call for production and jobs, but let's delve a little bit more into the intersection of criminal activity and state-sponsored policies, exploring how the mafias exploit gaps in regulation and governance. So, Mike, can you maybe explain the relationship that you've seen between organized crime and construction mafia, particularly with regard to the misapplication of procurement policies like the PPPFA, the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act? Do you want to maybe just share a little bit about that?
So, Neil, we aren't too directly exposed to that type of thing, but from the knowledge that we have, government in trying to implement, let's call it, equity stakeholding in bigger projects, and this applies mainly to government projects for state rollout. Immediately it goes through processes where they do, as Sia indicated, stipulate that around about 30% should be going to local and previously disadvantaged partners, etc., so that the local operators in the community is supported, and there can be work generated to people who need it. Simple as that. So the intent is great. And then it comes down to, okay, fine, certain people are controlling those contracts and putting them out, and then losing control largely to who those 30% beneficiaries become. Or in a worst case scenario, they are involved in stipulating who those 30% become. And that, I think, with state capture kicking in, and let's call it over the last 10 years, that has got worse, because without accountability and with organized crime tentacles getting into government, it became a case of picking cherries. But the problem is that things go wrong, and they are engaging with people who don't obey the law. So they mustn't think that they're going to obey the rules in terms of the 30% or delivering on work or doing any of that. They just want to take. So the issue there is that as soon as it became syndicated, and became rife, and as here indicated as well, certain of those big, strong groupings got involved, they lost control themselves. So it was the same as letting the Guptas in, and then losing control. So government loses control, and it becomes rife and prolific, and so many of the projects actually ended up not being delivered, or they just came to a standstill. So that is disastrous for the country. So the policy, whilst the intention was good, not allowing for criminality, not allowing for the proper controls to be implemented, not providing the main contractors with the support that they need to implement these contracts, then the whole thing falls apart and everybody loses. So
Absolutely.
I think that is, in a nutshell, it's been, they stepped into a gap. They saw a massive gap with state capture happening. And, from the odd report seen, it looks like we've had state involvement, or certainly at certain levels in government. So the guys are being protected as well. So on many layers, one needs to then look at how to address those things. And I mean, I know that there is a state initiative at the moment. The police is supposed to be supporting it, etc. But we all know that the police, whilst their salaries and the cost of policing has gone through the roof, we've got more generals per foot patrolling cop than any police organization in the world, just about. So you've got top guys taking salaries, nobody doing the work. And we see it directly every single day in our operation, where we're calling on police support, and it's just not available, or just spread way too thin. So there are still good people out there trying to do the work, but guys are spread too thin. So your enforcement, whilst they may, say we're doing this and that, and there's this and that operation on the go, it will only possibly touch the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for setting that scene. Interesting. I interviewed Dion Vincel. He's the chairman of the Western Cape Property Development Forum, and his opinion is that one of the reasons why they've allowed to get their tentacles into different departments is because there's been so few projects, and the government has rolled out such a few that they've almost been able to cherry pick which one that they could select along the way. So, so one of the things, the activity has been so low, so it's almost opened the door, for that kind of activity to be able to make an impact. Dylan, I want to come to you. Let's focus on the direct economic implications for developers and investors, such as, the increased costs, the delays, and risks of financial loss. So how do these construction mafias affect the financial ability of, let's talk large scale? And you're not really a large scale property developer because you're in the township, so you don't really have a problem, but you got a solution which you're going to give us at the end. So maybe just tell us, what are those effects?
Yeah, as you said, we're actually not directly affected by the construction mafia, but we work in a space where it's talked about a lot. And you're saying now that one of the possible reasons for it proliferating is a lack of projects, but it's a catch-22, right? The fact that, or the rumor of construction mafia is a big deterrent from implementing many more projects. And we see this with a lot of the funders we speak to. whether it's government funding or even foreign funding, but private funding locally, there's a big fear of investing proper capital into projects, especially in certain areas. And that's obviously a big deterrent to, real development into the future. We also see it on the implementation scale level. So certain areas we can't go into because our contractors we partner with, they just won't go into those areas. We also see stuff happening like the contractors being stopped when they're leaving site and their bucky being taken or supplies being taken, that sort of thing. And for them, they're rolling project to project. They don't have lots of excess cash flow. These are the small scale projects. They're doing maybe 2 or 3 properties for us at a time. That takes, there's a massive knock that they take for that. So it affects things, across the scale, big developers, but small developers as well. Yeah, and I can talk about some of the ways around that maybe.
No, absolutely. We'll get to that. We will definitely get to that because, we're also talking about solutions as well. We don't only want to look at, how do we deal with it and that kind of thing. So let's just unpack, some of the methods of operation. I mean, we're talking extortion, in many cases, violence and threats and that kind of stuff. And the impact it has on the industry, security and productivity. So, Sia, I want to come back to you. So what are the common tactics? Because you directly in the firing line, in many cases, you represent a number of companies. So you got good understanding of this used by the mafias to intimidate the developers and contractors. What are some of those common tactics used by them?
Yeah. Neil, I think just before I tackle that, I just want to add a couple of things to what Dylan has indicated,
Yes.
and maybe, from a direct sort of project level, some of the things that have a negative impact on investment, on the projects and things. I think the first thing is time is money, right? So if you have these guys that basically come in, and I'll touch on tactics as well. So typically, I mean, it'll be a normal day on a construction site, and then all of a sudden there are guys at the entrance. Construction sites now generally will have security, at the gate. The gate will be shut generally, all the time, which never used to happen. But there will be a security official there. They will bulldoze themselves into that sort of situation and demand to speak to whoever the contracts manager, the site agent is, and then they'll sit and have a meeting that was never prearranged. And then, they'll say, what's the contract value? Okay, if the contract value is X, no, but I read in the newspaper that actually the contract value is Y, therefore 30%. We are from the local area. We represent the guys in this area, therefore you must talk to us. That's generally how they'll come in. But what ultimately happens is that there will be a disagreement, and then the guys will say, okay, well, if that's the case, we will shut your site down. You cannot continue. They will threaten everybody. Workers on site will not want to sort of come back, and they will force the contractors to shut the site down. And if the site is then shut down, it leads to extension of time claims from the contractor, because this is a factor that they can't control. Completing a project late means that the client has got to pay more. There's escalation. There's all sorts of things that are in there. If there's additional costs that the developer now has to pay, it means that the viability of that project starts to be questionable. And if the project is late, there's potential loss of income. Take a shopping center, for example. If a shopping center has to open, generally shopping centers around this time of the year have to be open by around October. If you miss the October deadline, you need to try and do it for Easter, because the October is just getting you ready for the December break, but you need to deal with the teething issues between now and December. And then, the following year. So if you miss the December trading period as a shopping center developer or a or a tenant, then I mean there's loss of income. So it's got direct financial impact on investors and those that are supposed to benefit from those projects. Take a power project, for example. A power project must be finished by this date. The independent power producer is expecting to start generating income because they produce electricity and then they then sell it to Eskom. If they miss that deadline, it's loss of income. But you then have things like your lenders that are expecting you to start repaying your debt, because as a developer, investor, you must start paying your debt because it's, you know, there's a particular date by which you need to start repaying. So it's got major implications. So it's got major implications in terms of discouraging investment. Yet in this country, we need more investment so that we can tackle our social ills. And you know, the tactics are basically by threatening. It's by saying perhaps, because they're now doing this in the private sector as well, even where the 30% rule does not apply. But they will still threaten. And that's generally what gets done on these construction sites. Hopefully I've covered both of issues.
Absolutely. Yes, you did. Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Sia. So let's just talk about focus on effectiveness of law enforcement and, you know, security, curbing the influence of construction mafia and improvements needed in policing and judicial oversight. So Mike, I want to come to you because you play a little bit of a big brother role in terms of security. So what role does the SAPS play, South African Police Services, in combating the construction mafia, and what more needs to be done to increase effectiveness?
Yeah, Neil, so they, you know, on a localized basis, obviously each site is responsible for their own security setup, and we see various approaches to that. We've been involved with numerous big sites where traditionally we used to be brought on, you know, when the site's nearing completion, but these days they're pushing the button when they're establishing site. So you come on as a surveillance element while construction is getting going, and then through the process. So it's largely on the perimeters, etc., using AI, looking for groupings of people, so we can give early warning. Some of the bigger contractors have got preset contracts in place with tactical teams to come in to protect the staff on site at a drop of a hat. And even, you know, I think a big wake-up call was the riots that we had a couple of years ago. A lot of more proactive solutions have come out since then. And the same type of solutions can be applied not just to the shopping centers and DCs and all the rest, but to the construction sites as well. In this instance, when you're getting people coming through to do threatening things, the same as you'll have, you know, every now and then we'll have a grouping of potentially some EFF guys will pop up at a site and they've come to negotiate on behalf of whoever. So technology is starting to play a role more and more in helping protect the sites, also keeping the manpower to a minimum, because there's the risk of collusion. But worse than that, you know, as Sia indicated, it's the risk of threat. So they'll watch the site and they'll see who's coming and going, and they don't have to target them on site necessarily. They can target them off site. When the guys leave, they're commuting, they'll follow them. In the case of the one project manager in KZN recently, they followed him and they tackled him in his vehicle down the road. So they can get more subtle and threaten families and that type of thing as well. So it gets really nasty and deep. So that then moves over from the physical protection side of things into the, let's call it the crime intelligence realm. And that's where you have to have a collaboration between the private sector and law enforcement. These days, private sector and through Business Against Crime and all of these initiatives that we are all involved in, even as security providers, we have to hold hands because the intelligence is shared, and it's you have to be one step ahead of these guys. So, starting up a big construction site, if you haven't got all your contingency plans in place, you'd be naive to go down that route. So law enforcement is also at a SAPS level. They've had a pretty dysfunctional crime intelligence element, as you know. They've had hassles with that over the last couple of years. So now they're trying to fix it and bring it back online. State capture was instrumental in making sure that it was depleted. And you need to be investigating the guys at different levels. So you need the Hawks and those type of guys to be running their investigations to identify who's involved, who the trends are, to what level are these syndicates going, because it's all syndicated and organized now. Let's face it, there's big money behind it, and these guys are ruthless. They often in these syndicates are involved in other things as well. So they utilize some of their cash in transit teams. So when things are getting hot on the cash in transit side and it's getting too hot, they'll use those same criminal elements to do other work. We see that continuously. So the only way to deal with that is on a national basis with hard intelligence work, and then having the capable people like the Hawks, etc., to be able to go and actually arrest and take the heads off the snakes. So, but they might hit the odd political barrier if somebody higher up's involved and there's protection. And so there's really the two elements. There's a physical on site, and then it's the intelligence work, etc. We've seen some good extortion gang takedowns by SAPS and their teams recently. They're also getting very ruthless with the cash in transit groups, because they shoot back, and that's really what's happening now. It's getting down to the teams and the syndicates being taken out. But unfortunately, the teams on the grounds, etc., all are the footmen, and getting to the higher ups in the syndicates is the tricky part.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for setting that scene. And, I just want to say to our audience, if you've got any questions, please fire away, to the team over here. I see Sia just said he's got problems with his cam, but he'll be on now shortly. So Sia, we'll get to you now shortly. I want to chat to you, Dylan, because I think this is quite important. Let's explore a little bit of a more holistic approach to addressing the socioeconomic factors contributing to mafia activity, focusing more on community engagement, development, etc. So maybe, Dylan, how can property developers like yourselves, and I think you're probably doing a lot of that, and the private sector work with communities to address the root causes of construction mafia activity? Because it seems to be working for you. Also, touching on the economic inequality and lack of employment opportunity. Do you want to open up a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think, firstly, the key thing for us has been to be very low key, sort of under the radar, and that works for our business model. We invest a lot into township construction, but it's across lots of individual sites. We're not doing the construction ourselves. We're partnering with local contractors, and their teams are from the areas we're building in. So it's very embedded in the communities we're working with. We're there with the express permission of the homeowner whose property we're on. They've invited us to build on their property. So I think that helps us a lot. It's low key, you know, our sites look like any backyard rental construction site that's happening in the township. And I think that's been really key, because we're working with, as we were discussing earlier, there are a lot of socioeconomic reasons that people, at least on the grassroots level, resort to, you know, extortion and that sort of thing. They've got, you know, families at home to feed, very high unemployment. There's not much to do. They can see money coming in, and, you know, it's not reaching them. But it's the same situation for our homeowners, and it's the same situation for the project manager on our properties. So I think there's much more implicit acceptance from the communities we work in for us to be there to help the homeowner, to help their children, you know, the tenants that live in our flats, the contractors that roll on projects for us, that use the income from that to feed their families. Obviously much harder to do on a much, you know, a shopping center or a much bigger project, but I think the fact that that works, how we've done it, is maybe an indication of how you can still go into development, but meet the needs of people in the community in similar situations to those that might be the ones that would resort to extortion.
Okay, and I think maybe just elaborate a little bit on your business model, because what you're doing is you're actually empowering the community, but most importantly, you're actually offering the community an employment opportunity as well. Because when you're in that whole development phase, just talk a little bit about that, because I think that's critically important. You've embraced the community. You've embraced the employment within those areas and that community. And there's a kind of a sort of, we're giving back, you know, you're part of the solution. Do you want to just talk about your model and your experiences there?
Yeah, so the overarching purpose of our model has been to attract private investment into township development in a sustainable, scalable way. So, you know, not reliant on government funding or donations or that sort of thing. And that's all with the aim of creating impact for the homeowner primarily. So our funding comes from private sources. We use that to build flats on our partners' properties. And then for 10 years, the rental income that we get out of that goes back to the investor. So they earn a return over 10 years. So from their point of view, it incentivizes investment. We get more capital and we can build for more people. From the homeowner's point of view, it's someone coming to us who's been wanting to do this for years. They've seen flats go up all around them to varying degrees of informality. The land they have is the only real asset of value they have. And getting these flats there's a short-term financial gain, but it's very much a long-term, it's a pension asset they're investing in to look after them when they're retired, to leave to their kids. So it's massive for them. They invite us in to do that. Yeah.
Okay, no, great. So I think there's and I mean, obviously, because you have little interference, you know, that must be testimony in itself that something is working there, embracing the community. I just want to check here. We're going to be talking to your ghost now, because you are in the background, right?
Yeah. I'm still
here. We don't see you, but we can hear you.
Let's hope the construction mafia has not done anything to get us here. But at
well,
least
we
you can
hope
hear
not.
me.
We hope not. No, but we got Mike there. He's from Verifier. He's watching you. So,
right.
okay. So
Great.
Sia, let's just talk a little
Yeah.
bit about the involvement of political connections. And I just want to finish off on that in the construction mafia and how it impacts the transparency and fairness of the public sector procurement processes. Because I think you're dealing with this all the time, looking in, corruption, political interference, and that kind of stuff. Do you just want to elaborate a bit about that?
Well, I guess, I mean, in an ideal world, you don't want any political interference in these kind of things. But I guess reality, though, is that at some level, you do get political influence in one way or the other. At local government level, you will have ward councillors, for example, that are responsible for particular areas. Again, in a perfect world, you would expect that those ward councillors will act as community leaders, and they are the guys that we actually have to approach when we are still at the planning phase of a project, and communicate with them and put plans in place, better understand the communities, etc., in order to move forward. But you can have a good apple, you can also have a bad apple. So if that political leader in an area who's been appointed represents a certain political party, but also now is appointed in terms of local government as a ward councillor for an area, he can either have a positive influence on your project or a negative influence on your project. When it comes to procurement, we obviously, ideally, we don't want a situation where politicians are involved in even in procurement, but it's possible. Those things are absolutely critical. But I just want to touch on some of the solutions here, Neil, as well.
Absolutely, of course.
I think I see it almost at three different levels. Some of it has been touched on by Mike with regards to the collaboration that needs to happen between government, SAPs. So when I say government, I'm talking about largely the procurers, those that are involved in the construction space. So National Department of Public Works, provincial government, municipalities, and so forth, all different spheres of government. Collaboration with SAPs, collaboration with the industry, the built environment, the construction industry bodies, and so forth, in ensuring that there is an action plan. So that needs to happen at that sort of level. And I understand that that is already happening. I read a headline saying there were about 700 arrests that took place a couple of months ago. So something is starting to happen there, which is great. So that needs to continue, because this has major implications for the construction industry, for our economy as a whole. So that's the one part. But I think, secondly, we need to have a strategy that almost ensures that we can isolate these guys. They should not be heroes, They should not be seen to be representing communities. So we've got to have a strategy that ensures that, we are 2 steps ahead of them, and that they cannot then say, we represent this community. But how do you do that? And this is now what I think is critical. The first thing that's got to happen is that, we must realize that we, as I indicated, we live in an unequal society. We live in a society where there's high unemployment. We live in a society where there's poverty. So as private sector leaders, we first have to realize that this is not just a government role. We as private sector leaders have got a role to play to ensure that these issues are addressed, because if you don't address them, they will affect you. They will ultimately affect you. And this is also part of the root cause that says, there's an adversarial relationship between those that have and those that don't have. So try and close the gap. So as a developer, ensure that you have people such as social facilitators that form part of your project team, and you bring them in as early as possible during the planning phase. Whilst the team is still busy with concept design, detailed designs, tender documentation, and so forth, bring them early. Let them start engaging the community. Let them start understanding the community. Let them start understanding the needs of the community. What are the skills levels in the area? What are the kind of jobs that would be suitable on this type of project for this particular community? What are their training needs? Because perhaps some of those can be incorporated into the project, and the project can benefit and the community can benefit in the form of training that is provided. Who are the right guys? Who are the leaders in the area? Understand them, understand the local dynamics. Because if you don't understand them, that is when the construction mafia will actually take advantage of you. But if at construction stage, you have now done all of this homework and you've even set up things like project steering committees that consist of the contractor, the developer, the professional team, the ward councillor, as well as business leaders in that community. By the time you start with construction and then some guy says, or some group says, we are the construction, well, we are demanding this, everyone will turn around and say, but who are you? You know, and you can then have the buy-in from the community that says, no, 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 we don't want anything that is going to disrupt this project, because they've bought into the project, they understand why the project is critical, and they know how they're going to participate in the project. So that kind of buy-in becomes important and immediately isolates the construction mafia. Then there's the hard part, of course, and we cannot compromise on that. And that is, as soon as it's criminal, then let's deal with it decisively. And that's when Mike and the rest of the team then come in. And we have to be ruthless and also go to the point of ensuring that there is the prosecutions actually take place. So that those who think about this next time can think again.
Thank you for that. No, great. Thank you for that, Sia. I think makes a lot of sense. Mike, I want to come to you because talking about solutions, but talking about, innovative and modern tools to provide solutions. So, focusing, let's look at technology and process improvement. So Mike, what role can technology, such as digital platforms for transparent procurement or security technologies on construction sites and play in mitigating the influence of construction mafias?
So if you from a governmental level, the decentralized processing, if you actually, all the models run to everything being centralized. So you'll have from treasury, it goes down to department, and then you have departmental procurement, etc. But what keeps the whole process honest? This is the challenge that they face. And with digitization, really, what is the most honest form of procurement or monetary form that we could use across the world today? It's the likes of Bitcoin. So if you have your decision making where you don't have one key person or just 3 people on a committee signing off on something, you can keep the process honest. So if they were to look at some form of modeling like that, so that it has to be treasury involvement and randomly various people who are empowered but are not in direct contact. So you can keep your appointments and things at a very high level, not under the control of 1 or 2 key individuals. So you go to really the top and you stop the rot happening at that level. Then what's coming down the line into the process is less under direct influence, let's put it that way. So take the influence aspect away, and that's where AI and modeling and decentralization of decision making, it's available. Bitcoin uses it, so you can utilize modeling in that sense. And then intelligence gathering and all of that, there is very sophisticated software available already. They are using it for linkages, for working out who are these people. Oh, hold on, Neil's involved with X and he's got X and Y company, and oh, look at who his mates are, and scanning social media and all the rest of it. That tech is already in place. But you know, whether the law enforcement bodies have invested properly into it or not, it remains to be seen. Many of the investigators we know are still having to do it on paper. So that takes time. So at a governmental level, you need to fix certain problems like that. Is there a role to play in tech and AI and all of this? Absolutely. But, you know, as Sia said, as Dylan has said, it's more a macro problem than it is a micro problem. And I think you know, for my sins, we were even involved in property development years ago as well. And even at that stage, engaging with the communities early on proved invaluable. You know, we were working in Belhar and Elsie's River and all over the show where there was gangsterism was rife. But community involvement, we realized very early on, was critical. And we even see it now with some of our bigger, even listed and rate clients where who focus on shopping malls, for example. They've got such good relationship with their local communities, the play school adjacent to the mall, the taxi associations. Some of them even have incentive schemes going where they reward the best taxi driver who services the mall with a new taxi at the end of the year. And their voting is done by the commuters. And they've brought them into the fold. And guess who are their best informants now? It's the taxi operators. The taxi operators behave themselves, they work well with them, and they're part of the community. And that shopping mall is their destination, so it's their money stream. So you know, Sia's has spoken to it, you know, broadly in that as well. But I think, and with Dylan and that, engaging local, it has to be on that basis. So that's why I said the pre-planning for any development has to drop down to the micro level. And this is the issue where government appoints at a very high level, and they'll want to appoint a big contractor and do this and that, and say there has to be 30% involvement. Hold on, change your modeling a little bit now. You guys are going to have to be involved further down in terms of making sure that the social impact is done properly, etc., and that pre-planning. So the other classic one that came out was with the development being done at Black River, where there were opposing views on who the traditional body was representing the Khoi people. And it turned out that this guy who held it up for a year with court action and that wasn't actually the representative of the Khoi people, but he was in there to try and make a buck. They'd already settled it with the traditional groups that, you know, years before that. So that needs to be taken out, and ruthlessly.
Absolutely.
And you know, if all the bodies involved, as Sia said, from the outset, we know who we're dealing with. This is the community representation, etc., and we have the backup of the security and SAPS and the whole security cluster. Bang, we go ahead. Anyone sticks their head up, you're not involved. And I think not ignoring the security cluster is critical. You need to bring the crime intelligence guys in, etc., because it's a colossal threat to our, you know, to our economy.
Absolutely.
And social upliftment in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. Thanks for that, Mike. We're just running a little bit short on time now. So what I want to do is I want to deal with the 3 questions. And Dylan, you will have a chance to wrap up and also, you know, give some comments. I'll give each one of you a wrap-up opportunity at the end in closing. But 3 questions, and I'm not quite sure who, but I'm gonna pose the question from Andrew. Thank you for your question, Andrew. How can transparency in bidding processes help the influence of construction mafias? Are there any successful examples from other countries where construction mafia were effectively eliminated? See, I don't know whether if you would like to have a crack, or anybody else.
Okay, so I saw the one part of that question was also around the transparency in terms of the bidding process. Look, I guess we are unique, right? It depends where you go. I mean, I recently spent time in Singapore, and would you potentially have the construction mafia there? No, definitely not, because they have completely different challenges. So it becomes very difficult to say this we can learn from this. So we are unique. We've got this as a challenge in this country, and we've got to find a way. I mean, we've had bigger challenges that we've been able to overcome in the past, and I think this is something that we definitely can overcome over a period of time. But I want to re-emphasize the importance of all leaders, political as well as business leaders, taking an active role in terms of ensuring that we can address our social challenges in this country. And then, of course, the issue around security and ensuring that there's justice and people are held accountable becomes critical as well. So unfortunately, I can't think of any other country where I can say to you they have managed to eliminate the construction mafia, because it seems to be a uniquely South African phenomenon.
Well, they managed to get some of the drug cartels in Colombia, maybe Colombia. Pablo Escobar and his, they were in everything. But anyway, that's history. So let's move on to the next question. Thank you for that answer. There's another one. There's two more I just want to deal with, and I'll give you both all an opportunity to wrap up. From Jeremy, is there a role for the trade unions to assist the construction industry in countering and overcoming disruptions on development and construction sites? It's probably another one for you as well, because you might have a view on that as well, Mike, because you said for your sins you were a developer as well, and the other two sinners might want to actually answer that question. So who would like to have a crack at that one?
Yeah, so maybe let me come in on that one as well, Neil. Look, I think it's got to be a collaborative approach, and all key stakeholders need to take an active role here. Unions, of course, represent workers, and workers don't want these kinds of disruptions on their projects. So I think it is in the interest of workers as well as of unions to pick these issues up and try and be solutions orientated and come up with the necessary solutions. They are the ones that are on these construction sites. They want construction to proceed. A lot of the times, when there are these kind of disruptions, particularly for those that are employed by subcontractors, generally what happens is that if a construction comes to a standstill, the main contractor will then inform subcontractors and say, listen, guys, we have to stop. And then subcontractors use full-time as well as casual labor. And a lot of the times that casual labor, will be gone. So he may have invested a bit of training and that kind of stuff to be of benefit to this project. But if the project is now delayed for long periods of time, they will lose those guys. So unions can definitely play a role as well, but not on their own. They need to, of course, work collaboratively with business bodies that represents the construction sector.
Great, thanks. Mike, you said you wanted to add to that?
No, I was saying I believe CEO would be better placed. He's more current.
No, absolutely. No, definitely. Okay, I'm going to get to our last question, and there's a comment there as well from Leon. He says his experience is that the construction mafia are chances, claiming they're from the community with no proof and bribing SAPs to achieve their objectives. The so-called community is 30 kilometers away, and as an example, and then they intimidate the construction workers on and off the site. Political solutions take forever. So how do we solve this in the short term? How do smaller projects from 20 to 100 units, and it is not feasible to have a youth security contingent? I don't know. What do you think? Mike, do you have any thoughts on that? Any experiences with clients being in that position who are under threat that have probably knocked on your door? Or maybe, Dylan, you've got some first-hand thoughts as well. Who wants to have a crack? Mike?
Yeah, from our experience, we've got lots of contractor clients, and they literally utilize our services from the start. And some of the sites are smaller, some of them are larger, but they've pretty much built that type of thing into their PNGs. They've got the security component in the PNGs. The added benefit is that they're finding they have less less losses off site in any case. So it solves two problems, and so that has been our exposure. But yes, it's a line item. It's a cost item, and I understand the smaller projects aren't sitting with a massive PNG. So they are impacted probably more heavily in the direct sense, because the small contractor can't take a knock. The big contractors doing work for government or whatever are able to pass additional PNG up the line. But your small contractors can't. There's nobody to pass it on to. They have to absorb it, and that's disastrous, because we're reliant on this economy needs massive small contracting jobs, for example. Small business needs to be supported.
Absolutely. Well, Dylan, you're a small business, smaller than most of the other projects. And it seems that a lot of your due diligence up front is done pretty well to avoid maybe a situation like that. You want to comment maybe on that comment made?
Yeah, just following up on that, Mike, we have no PNGs in our costing at all. And the solution is really what you and Sia have already said. It's due diligence before, it's getting embedded in the community before, and doing it properly and really, being genuine about it. For us, that means talking to every neighbor, whether we have to for council or not. If a neighbor's not happy or someone in the street committee is not happy, we won't do the project. Maybe at a larger scale, it's asking your local shops and stuff. If the community has so much resistance, is there somewhere else you could do it? Not really trying to avoid conflict and everything right at the early stages. And we'll do that before we even we don't have drawings or anything. We have no plan left. And then how can you get the community on board? Can you hire someone local to be the key project manager who, that's going to be your biggest champion? They're going to protect you the most. Someone from the community that can really be upskilled and, run the project long term. And I think with a lot of this, it does mean, maybe you spend a bit more. Your project takes a bit longer, maybe it's lower short-term profit, but it's longer-term acceptance, longer-term development to the community, and it's just probably a better outcome overall. But I think depending on the project, the size of the community or the types of people in the community will differ. But if you have real buy-in from them, it really takes away a lot of the leverage that a bad player might have. Like in the question from Leon about bribing SAPs to achieve their objectives. A lot of our homeowners are policemen and policewomen, and that takes a lot of the kick right out of that argument. And we've had sort of threats like that before, but it hasn't amounted to anything. But I think only because we've got that buy-in, and I can only talk from a small development level.
Absolutely.
But I'm sure the principles apply.
Absolutely. I think a good comment there, definitely, Dylan, and I think you added value there to Leon's question. So we're going to come to closing. There's still 50-odd people on, so they obviously want to hear your closing comments. So wonderful. So I just want to say thank our audience for actually hanging on. We're coming to the end. I'm going to ask each one of our panelists just to close off a 1-minute wrap up, their final thoughts. But before I do that, there's a comment here from Dr. Zuliswe Shetshi. And she says, the construction mafia predicament transcends beyond the consultation processes that engage stakeholders. It seems that these processes, while necessary, do not always help to prevent the intimidation and extortion. And as Sia said, and she quotes him, in an ideal world, things would be different. Sadly, we construct in a completely unideal world where answers cannot be copied from any other corner of the world. So thank you for your comments there, Dr. Zuliswe Chetsi. And so I'm going to start off with you, Sia. If you can give us your final wrap, your parting shots to everybody, less than a minute, and maybe leave somebody with a thought that they can take away with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think just to re-emphasize what I said before, we've done it before with major challenges in the country. We can defeat the construction mafia. Let's start early. Let's look at risk management. This is definitely something that will happen on your project unless you plan accordingly. You will have major issues. So put risk management measures in place. Assess it as a risk, and then put in social facilitation during the planning phase, and then security as a cost now during the construction phase, as Mike indicated, is the norm. Anyone else will price for it, so don't think that by not pricing for it you are saving. You're actually helping yourself quite a bit. So yeah, just with those pointers, will defeat this. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Let's see. Mbanjwa, he's the CEO of Pace Property Group. Mike, your closing comments, please.
I think I haven't delved into whether they have or haven't directly taken it on as a project, but I think that they may be getting involved more, and that is engaging with Business Against Crime further on that, because they have certain MOUs with SAPS, etc., and they're able to bring in multiple stakeholders. So I think that could be an avenue. The properly registered security providers generally all work hand in hand with them. And we're able to help put pressure on the powers that need be for support through that mechanism.
It's Mike Voetman. He is the CEO of the Verify Group. Thank you, Mike, for your input. And last but not least, Dylan Walls. Would you give us your closing comments, please, Dylan?
Yeah, I think it's not an easy challenge. It's probably not one answer. That's why we're having a webinar about it. And it has to come from there's no silver bullet. There are lots of different angles, whether it's policy, local. I think policy, work from the police and that sort of thing needs to happen to create stability in the long run, but it's probably at the local level that, where things need to start, whether it's business, it's community level, it's smaller, it's working with smaller projects to, I don't know if nip it in the bud is the right thing, but to, get to people before they get into extortion and that sort of thing. But thanks very much, Neil.
No, thank you. Thank you. That's Dylan Walls. He's the Chief Operating Officer of Bitprop. So, gentlemen, thank you very much. Our three guest panelists here, Mike and Dylan, thank you for your valuable input for today's webinar. I think we definitely have to do a follow-up. We had really great interaction. We had more than 80 odd people on the webinar today, which says there's a lot of interest and also concern. And so your insights and expertise definitely added, I think, tremendous value. And just before we close, I want to remind our audience of our next webinar, which will be in our usual time slot next Thursday at 12. There is a link which is in the chat box. It's the power of property auctions, why buying and selling at auctions can be a game changer. So please join us next Thursday. You can either click on the link or go to the rei.co.za website. To our audience, we appreciate your active participation, your engagement. You've been wonderful today. If there's a particular topic that you'd like us to cover in the future, we've only got 3 more, I think, until the end of the year before we close off, and we'll start again in February in the new year, beginning of Feb. So please send it to info@rei.co.za if you've got any particular comments. So we hope that you not only gain valuable knowledge today, that you act on the shared knowledge that we have. So once again, take care and goodbye until next Thursday. And this is Neil Peterson along with the 3 panelists here, Mike and Dylan, signing off.